Welcome to the new style of delivery for our weekly coffee release. This is the extended version, the YouTube version, and one that I am going to attempt to delve a little deeper into the roast analysis of the coffee that I release on a weekly basis, which happens to be San Lorenzo, a regional coffee from Colombia. It's washed, mixed cultivar, and one that, although I have roasted it before on the Probat, I have never roasted it on the Loring. So I've got to analyze exactly what I'm doing. I've got to make sure that I am delivering an expression of the coffee that I desire as a roaster and owner of a business, whilst making it technically soluble so that my customers and clients can brew it successfully, and where I try not to impart any roast defects so that it is the best example of itself based on the dream that I have when I apply myself to roasting coffee. Anyway, so today is going to be an attempt to deliver a more technical analysis of this coffee that I've roasted. So, just as a brief overview, I will cup the coffees. I'm going to try to, and when I say try, use my editing skills to overlay the roast profiles and talk through a little bit what my thought process was, and then do some color analysis with my color analyzer afterwards. From there, I'll be able to ascertain which was my preferred roast profile based on these three batches. And then I lock that in going forward. So next time I roast it, I will hopefully be able to meet that roast profile and those flavor compounds. I'll go grind the coffee and come back shortly. Now that the coffee is ground, I'm going to make an assessment of the dry aroma to see whether any of them stand out more than the other. So let's have a quick sniff. So broadly the same. This one here has a slightly brighter expression on the nose. This one has a almost sweeter expression on the nose. And this roast is a little similar to the first. So far, my nose is telling me that this is going to be the most sweet. Is that what I want of the coffee? Who knows? We'll come back to that shortly. Next, apply the water, and I'll discuss through the roast profiles whilst we wait for the coffee to brew. Now that I've applied the water, I'm going to have a quick smell of these to see whether any of them on the wet aroma transfers into what I was smelling on the dry. And this cup definitely does have a more sweet, pungent smell versus those two, which have a broad similarity. So now I'm going to break, and then as I allow this to cool to taste, we'll quickly discuss through the roast profiles. So what we have here are three roasts, all performed on the Loring, and as you might be able to see here, these lines all look pretty similar. There is some variation towards the end here. There is some variation based on total time, 10 minutes 49 being the first batch, 24460. Then I've increased the time on the subsequent batch, trying to keep the end temperature the same, and also trying to keep the development time the same. Similarly then, I have tried to pick a total roast time on the final batch that is somewhere between the first two. With this, I was also, because I've extended the roast times versus this one, I was just trying to make sure that the development time is somewhere similar, just so I can figure out whether time is more important, first crack development time is more important, you know, those sorts of things. As we can see, first crack here is recorded at exactly the same point. And yeah, the end temperatures are similar. So there we are. I had to pick out an end temperature that I was possibly happy with, and this is based on the Loring as we know it now. Loring is in a position whereby I could roast lighter to a lighter coloration, and I could roast to a lower end temperature where you get more perceived sweetness, but I'm still learning the system, and I still need to work on a slightly conservative basis. And the reason being is that it would be awful if I underdeveloped the coffee. Slightly overdeveloping the coffee is more preferable. You can make it more extractable. More people will get some degree of enjoyment out of it. And I will work lighter and work to a lower end temperature as I become more proficient as a roaster on this. I have probably now only performed 200 batches on the coffee, on the roaster, pardon me. So there's some time yet until I can be a proficient roaster. So back to the profiles, I chose a drop-in temperature of 235 degrees Celsius. I have opted to allow the Loring soak time, which is about 20 seconds, to be the main, and then to have a fairly basic roast or roast approach whereby I apply one gas input that will take me through to a point at which I taper away. The roasts here seem pretty similar. There is some variation. I have, if I just take these off, you can see the roast there, we can see the roast there, and we can see the roast there. So all a fairly similar design. Now, is this the right roast for the coffee? I don't know. We'll soon find out. I will continue with the cupping. We will look at the roasts. I'll try and ascertain what's more important: roast time, end temperature, development time, and then we'll map these through to the color reading and see exactly where I get. So let's get into the actual cupping now. Okay, so on the first pass through, there is definitely on roast 24461 a more pronounced sweetness, albeit there is a slightly lower perception of acidity. The other two roasts are relatively similar, an expression of citric acid and then some caramelly texture. We're at 12.5 minutes into the brew time now, so I'll just work through this for the next couple of minutes, figuring out exactly where I'm at and whether there is a preference. Interestingly, at this point, I would like to proceed with some amalgamation of these two batches. I feel that batch 24461 has the most pronounced sweetness. And looking at my roast, this happens to be the longest of the roast times. And then batch 24462 has the most prevalent fruit composition. So what I might do next time, based on this being a slightly lower end temperature at 214.3 degrees Celsius, and this being slightly higher, 214.7, this was 10 minutes 53, this was 10 minutes 51. So I will try to roast the next batch at 10 minutes 53 seconds to this end temperature, 214.3, because that way I feel like I might get the best out of the sweetness and also the balance and the fruit composition from this roast. This is not to say that I don't like this roast. It's clean, crisp, transparent, bright, pretty beautiful, to be fair. Lots of chocolate, caramels, and that sweet clementine or satsuma, that type of thing. It's just that these two coffees here are slightly, a few percent better. And like I just conveyed, if we bring these two together, that's where maybe I would form the next batch. And also take these learnings into other washed coffees, mixed cultivar washed coffees, so that I've got some idea about how I may approach another new origin on the new apparatus. So what I'll next do is I'm going to just do a color analysis of these three coffees and see exactly how close they are in coloration, and again give me another marker going forward as to where I need to have my end color at. So now I'm going to take the color reading. These three coffees were all roasted on the same day. They have therefore had the same resting time, which has an impact on color. They've all been ground to the same grind size as well. Again, it has an impact on the color. And I will try now to standardize the amount of coffee used in this Light Tells color meter. So let's start with roast 24460. This is a very messy thing to do. So I'm just going to pour some coffee in here. I'm going to use my trusty ruler to move the coffee particles all the way around so there is the same depth across the sample size. There we are. Right, now I'm going to place the color meter on top. This batch, 24460, measures 84.3 on the Agtron Gourmet scale, which is very light. So let's move across to the next sample. So 24461 is 83.8. So a 0.5 degree of variation between those two batches. 85.6, wow, okay. 24462. So, what do we get from this? Roast 24462 with an end temperature of 214.3 degrees Celsius and total roast time of 10 minutes 51 was the lightest at 85.6, very light on the Agtron Gourmet scale. Now, the other coffee that I preferred, 24461, is at 83.8, which ironically is darker, not a dark coffee by any stretch of the imagination, still very light, but a darker color. And the double irony is that halfway between the two, which is where you would maybe surmise to move forward, the 24460 sits in the middle of the two. So maybe sitting in the middle of those two isn't the way forward. And actually what I need to do is to allow the coffee to rest a little more and then to ascertain whether I have a preference on going lighter on the scale and also going slightly darker on the scale, darker being the lower number, 83.8, and lighter being the higher number at 85.6. This is a little bit of a quandary. I think what I will do from here is actually do a side-by-side brewing of the two coffees, because it's all very well me cupping them. I will get a great analysis on the flavor of the coffee at that point, at that method of brewing. But that's not to say that my customers are going to be cupping their coffees at home on a Sunday morning. They'll be brewing their coffee. So what I may do to try and give myself an indication as to where and how I want to go forward with this coffee, I will brew a batch of roast 24462 and brew a batch of 24461 and understand where I have a preference in the brewed cup, which is exactly how my customers are going to consume it. Anyway, scratching of the head time. I mean, you do a lot of this in coffee, scratching of heads. There are things, I mean, look, the coffee is an incredibly complex food product. Not only is it chemically highly complex, it has a deep interplay with emotion. There is nuance of expression. I have to think about how I want to market the coffee as well. And I've got to balance all of this out against what my dream is for a roaster on a certain piece of apparatus, the Loring, which is, I want the coffee to be transparent. I want it to be well balanced. I want it to be sweet and have texture and harmonious. I would like it to be harmonious in the cup. So these are the questions that I'm trying to ask of these 3 roasts, all of which are pretty delicious, where I have this obscure preference to somewhere in between the 2, where the irony is this roast is the middle point based on color, and actually I don't have that preference. So I've got a divergence in where I want to go, and I've now got to, before next week, next Tuesday or Wednesday's roast production, I've got to understand where I have a preference. And this all boils down to how I'm going to brew it, taste of the brewed coffee, and a touch of finger in the wind, because they're both delicious. Well, they're all 3 of them are delicious. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. It's a little insight as to what a roaster does to analyze their efforts, and maybe then as a business owner about what he or she does in order to put out a product to market. Anyway, until next time, cheers.